Hi everyone, it's great to have you back for episode number 4 of Ben's Learning Lounge. Today we've got a slightly more serious topic. We're going to be talking a bit about chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a debilitating illness which I actually have myself. I've had it for about 3.5 years now, and I'm currently slowly but surely recovering from this illness, which affects up to 24 million people around the world. So it's obviously a topic I hold very close to my heart. Today we have a very special guest, Raelan. Raelan Agle actually has recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome. It took her 10 years of having the illness until she recovered, but she's managed to recover. She's back strong now, and she's got her own YouTube channel, which you can go and check out. I'll leave links to that in different places. She also has a book, which I bought myself and read through to make sure that it's all great for you guys. If you have chronic fatigue syndrome, I couldn't recommend it enough. It's called Finding Freedom. It's all about her escape plan, her incredible journey, and it's got some very helpful advice in there for people who do have chronic fatigue syndrome. I'll post a link to that on my YouTube and Facebook, but you can also read more about it on her website, raelanagle.com. That's spelled RAELANAGLE.com. That's RAELANAGLE.com. Also, if you want to check it out, I did an interview on her channel on YouTube. Again, that'll just be Raelan Agle on YouTube, and you can see the interview I did on her channel. Now, just a reminder too that this podcast is a fundraiser for mine. If you want to go check out them, you want to go to justgiving.com/fundraising/Ben's Learning Lounge. One more time, that's justgiving.com/fundraising/Ben's Learning Lounge. Mind are a great charity. They're all about helping people who have mental health issues or difficulties, and they provide services that help signpost people to what they can do, how they can support themselves, and providing advice, etc. So I really, really recommend giving to them, or at the very least, checking them out. Now, without further ado, I will pass you on to Raelan. All right, thanks again, Raelan, for saying you'd be on the podcast. It's brilliant to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to take part.
Yes, no problem. So today the topic is obviously chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, a lot of my listeners listening won't actually know what that is. They could probably pick together, maybe what it means from the words being used, but they might not have met anyone with it. So I was wondering, from your experience at least, what chronic fatigue syndrome is and what it has done to you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the name gives you an idea, but I think most of us who have it agree that it's kind of a crappy name because it can be a pretty serious and debilitating illness, and the name makes it sound like you just kind of get tired once in a while, when it's definitely a lot more than that. So for me, my experience has been that I'm just a regular, healthy, active, person working full time, working out all the time. I was about 30 years old and I got the flu, and then I essentially it never went away. So it was fatigue, yes, but extreme fatigue where I couldn't get out of bed for days. And no matter how much I rested, I wouldn't get any better. So it seems to be one of the hallmark symptoms for me is that severe exhaustion that is never made better by rest. And then anything that I did, whether physical or mental exertion, I would feel so much worse. And it could be really small things, like just a conversation with a friend, trying to socialize. Like I said, I worked out a lot, and all of a sudden I couldn't manage anything, like even just a few, crunches on the floor, and I would just feel sick afterwards. And there were some other symptoms too that came and go. It seems, as I understand it, to vary a bit from person to person. But I had, headaches and nausea that came and went. I had body aches. All of a sudden my sleep became really bad, which was frustrating because I was so exhausted and so sick, and I couldn't get the sleep that I needed. A term, I don't know if everyone's familiar with it, but brain fog is usually what we say.
Yes.
Thinking became really hard, concentrating on things, remembering things, coming up with the words for things, having just the clarity in my mind to hold a conversation with someone was really difficult.
It is strange, isn't it? Because when people talk about, when people think about chronic fatigue syndrome, a lot of people would probably just think of the fatigue, and hence why it's probably not the best name for it, because there are a huge range of extra symptoms that come alongside it, which are sort of obviously seen as secondary. But to name a few that I get, I get bad headaches, I get sore throats, I get the sort of ability after I've done an exercise, I'm very, very tired afterwards. I used to be quite active as well before I got it too. And that also seems like a common theme too. You mentioned that you're quite an active person, and you said you got the flu before you got it, right?
Yeah, that seems to be what kicked it off for me. I did have this throats as well. That was another one I forgot to mention.
Yeah, but it never just sort of comes on, it's not like a chronic fatigue syndrome for a lot of people that I've spoke to, at least with it. They just kind of get it. There tends to be this short period of sickness beforehand. I mean, I had the same experience. I actually had, I wouldn't say I didn't have the flu, but I had an incredibly bad sore throat. I know people might say that that's like candida or whatever, which it could be, but there's always some kind of health link beforehand that then sort of puts the onset on, right?
Yeah, the more people I talk to, the more I see that. And it's quite often it's some kind of virus, but it might be a car accident. I've talked to people who have got it after sports injuries. Some people after even just severe emotional trauma, like someone close to them dies, yeah. Something that hits them really, really hard. So yeah, there always seems to be some kind of blow to the body, whether it's a virus or an injury, and or not always, I can't say that, but for the people that I speak to, it seems common for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, especially as well with active people, I've noticed too. I mean, it looks like that people who tend to do a lot, and from hearing your own videos, which are great to listen to, by the way. I hear you talk about, your own struggles with beforehand. You're an incredibly active person before this, and I think your body does hit the brakes all of a sudden, really, doesn't it? Just kind of like, you're not listening to me. We need to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, it is definitely a theme amongst the people that I talk to. And so many people say, oh, when I listen to your story, it's like I could be saying it myself. I was exactly the same. It seems like a lot of people who really push the limits, a lot of overachievers. But then I think, one, it's a struggle for people who are so used to being so busy and so active. It's like running into a brick wall. But then also the mentality is that, well, I guess I just need to rest. Clearly, I've been running myself down, so I need to rest and this will go away. And in my experience, and most of the people that I talk to, or virtually everyone I talk to, rest never fixes it. It never goes away.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, I can 100% say that that's been the case for me too. And going back to the start there, when you talked about how it was originally for you, how is sort of chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosed? I mean, how did you know that definitely that was what you had?
Well, the first doctor I went to ran a whole bunch of tests and essentially concluded that there was nothing wrong with me, which was quite frustrating. All the tests were normal, but even the frustrating part for me was that even though my tests were normal, I felt that she should have still believed that there was something wrong with me, and I didn't even feel that she believed it. Like maybe I was just exaggerating or making it up. So I searched around until I found a doctor that was willing to believe me, essentially, and treat it seriously. And he eventually diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. It was sort of a process of elimination because he also did a ton of tests, far more thorough than the first doctor did. And when everything came up fine, just looking at the symptoms and just my overall experience, he diagnosed it from that. It was kind of a process of elimination.
Yeah, exactly the same for me, and I'm sure for everyone who gets it, is that it's never it would be a lot more, I don't want to say satisfying, because not having any sort of diagnosable disease is satisfying, but at least you can know you have the symptom of this, that's what it is. You have this, that's what it is. But with chronic fatigue syndrome, they can run you through all sorts of tests. I think I've had, over the 3.5 years, I've gone for about 6 or 7 different blood tests with different doctors until it was finally sort of, confirmed that I had chronic fatigue syndrome, that each time they would just come back normal. And it's from that they have to sort of, decipher, well, if there's nothing else wrong with him, it's sort of, we have to put it in this lump of it's chronic fatigue syndrome, which I suppose is also why a lot of people have different symptoms alongside with it when it's such a large umbrella term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's odd. You start wanting, at least I found, those blood tests to come back showing something, because it's really frustrating not to see an example, and it feels more concrete.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I did my bit of research before I knew that that's definitely what I had, and I just was like, yeah, well, that looks like it fits the bill, that looks like it's the right term. And then when it's quite funny actually, because the doctor called me and she said, so, I just want to confirm with you that you do have chronic fatigue syndrome. And I went, oh, right, yeah, okay. And she went, usually at this time, we give the patients a little bit of time to sort of think about it. And I said, well, I sort of thought about it for the past year. And she went, oh, all right then. Well, if you need anything else, it was just kind of wrapped up that way.
And how did you feel about that diagnosis?
In some way, honestly, Raelan, I think I felt comforted that I finally had one, because it took a good few years until that was actually put in front of me. So just to know that was there was glad, and to then have something taken a little bit more seriously. Speaking to my doctor, then they were able to talk more a little bit about if I needed time off work, that they would provide me some slips and things, because I was working originally full time, and then I moved it down to part time, and now I'm not working there at all. But it was just good to have that ability to have those services available, just knowing that they were there and knowing that I was going to be taken a little bit more seriously. I don't know if that was the similar case for you.
I think I had somewhat of a unique experience because my mother also was really sick, and she also was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. So I watched her suffer with it for so many years that I was actually really familiar with the diagnosis. And it was a really hopeless diagnosis in my experience. So I wanted any other diagnosis than chronic fatigue syndrome. So even just hearing those words for me felt like a death sentence. So I didn't feel any relief. I think I would have rather kept going with no label than that label. Yeah, but most people I talk to say the same as you. It's just good to have a name to put to your experience and at least some sort of direction to go with it.
I think as well, doing that research earlier and seeing what chronic fatigue syndrome was, I think I already had that experience too of just being like, well, that's what it is, I suppose. This is the word chronic's in there, what am I going to do? And I sort of had that experience beforehand. But what I want to come to really, and one of the interesting things about this podcast is that even though you've had chronic fatigue syndrome, you've actually managed to make a recovery over the years. And that's from a few different factors of things that you've put in place. And watching your videos, you talk a lot about these things. So I want to know firstly about how those first few years were with chronic fatigue syndrome and how you managed to keep a positive mindset and what you actually actively tried to do during those years. And then also how you managed to begin that process of recovery.
I'll try and give you the quick highlights of it. The first couple of years I was the sickest. So the first couple of years it hit me really hard. I couldn't even, the vast majority of the time, even walk 1 or 2 minutes. I was just mostly in bed. But despite that, I somehow did manage to try a lot of things. I spent tens of thousands of dollars on testing, on supplements, on trying different therapies. The doctor I landed with was, he did a mix of Western medicine and holistic medicine. So we did, conventional kind of approaches. I was put on antivirals, antibiotics, thyroid medication, things, different prescriptions to support the different organs in my body. But then I also went on this insane supplement regimen I was taking about 100 pills per day.
Wow. No way.
I was a really big believer in building my body back up. So just everything under the sun, and I was giving myself B12 injections and so many things. I bought an infrared sauna and installed it in my basement because I was told that could help with the body's healing. I was doing dry skin brushing. I was meditating. I just anything, everything. Every book I could find, I did every single thing that I could manage. And I did see some progress in those first couple of years. I cleaned up my diet. I made my whole home completely, organic and toxin-free. There were no more, toxic cleaners, and all of my food came from organic markets, and cut out all the junk food, all the alcohol, all the bad stuff.
It's quite a commitment though, isn't it? Because you're having to really, obviously it shows too about how difficult it is to live with the symptoms, that you're so prepared, you're just happy just to throw away everything just for the goddamn chance to feel a bit awake.
Absolutely. It's just pure desperation, for lack of a better word. Like, I will try anything. I did some kind of constellation therapy where you had to, communicate with your dead ancestors and that they would help you heal. And I honestly didn't really put much stock in a lot of this stuff, but it was just that desperation. Like, all right, let's try it. It worked for someone out there. It's worth a shot. So some of that stuff actually pulled its weight in the beginning, and I suspect it was mostly just all those efforts to clean up my life, because it really can go a long way. I've come to appreciate things like, diet and, supporting your body and getting, sunshine and enough water and all that stuff can help more than I used to give it credit. So that was my first couple of years, but then I kind of plateaued, and I felt like I'd run out of things to try. I really felt like I was doing everything that I'd ever read or heard about or that my doctor told me to do. And I kind of just hit this breaking point where I couldn't just, after 2 years of this intense bubble of just working so hard to get well and my whole life being about my being sick, that I just couldn't do it anymore. And also my mom passed away. I got divorced. My whole life kind of felt like it was imploding. And I just had this sort of early midlife crisis, and I just needed to take a break from it all. So I did. And for the next few years, I kind of just coasted. And my focus was just more on trying to get through my days. And I was about 50% better at this point, which helped me to survive, but it was still really rough. Every single day was still this struggle. Every single day was this stressful battle where I really didn't know how I could get through it. I could do things for small amounts of times, maybe go up for an hour or two and do things, but then I'd come back home and I'd crash and I would just be so exhausted and I'd have to be in bed for hours, probably till the next day, trying to recuperate. So that was my life for a few years until I realized I couldn't live the rest of my life that way. It was just too hard. So then I got serious about healing again. And from everything I'd read and learned and the things I tried over the years that had shown some progress, I just put together this own healing program for myself. And again, for about 2 years, went back into that pretty much that healing bubble of just really 100% focusing on getting myself well. I didn't think it was going to be 2 years. I was hoping it was going to be more like 6 months or a year where I really cracked down and then I would have this finally taken care of. But it ended up taking about 2 years. But it worked. Eventually it worked. The plan that I put together wasn't perfect from the start. I had to tweak it and learn from things as I went and see things that weren't working and try new things. But eventually it all came together.
So how did you, I mean, first of all, that's incredible. Just managing to hear how you managed to get through that, putting all that into place. A few things I'm interested in is, especially during that time when you knew you were going to get more serious again about healing, I think it's easy for a lot of us to not hang our ego up, not put it aside sometimes. And we know we want to get serious and we might have these short bursts where we are serious and then we kind of pay the price for it later. How did you manage to keep that balance of your energy whilst you were trying to heal yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it was rough. It was, especially the first year, it was a tough year. Exercise was a part of what I was doing. And even though I could only do so little, it made me feel worse. So however bad I was already feeling, this recovery program of mine made my life even harder. But the thing that kept me going and kept me motivated was that I could see that it was working. And after so many years of being sick, just seeing those really small gains was like winning the lottery. So I just knew there was no searching for motivation or trying to find, the will to keep going. It was just there. I felt unstoppable. Like nothing in the world was going to keep me from doing what I was doing because I could see myself finally digging myself out of this, horrible situation I'd been in for years. Unfortunately, I had the support of my then boyfriend, now husband. We moved in together, and just having someone there to support me through it really helped tons. And I didn't, I had that company because I think when you're chronically ill, you spend a lot of time alone and the loneliness can be really toxic. So just having that constant, loving support person in my life to just be there while I put all my focus into myself, really helped hold everything together. So between the progress and the support, it wasn't easy, but it was doable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a key part too, about if you can find someone who does understand, be that a friend, be that a family member, be that someone in your relationship with, but someone who really does get what you're going through and can support you through that, I suppose can really make the world of difference. I mean, I'm quite lucky to have I don't know what the word would be, tolerant friends of what I've got. They can work around it. They know if I'm cancelling plans, that type of stuff. And they're very interested in how I'm managing. And I have to say that has been a huge force in me managing to be a bit more calm with myself and sort of just get through it with that knowledge that my friends are there beside me. And I think that is sort of, like you said, incredibly important.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to know, and this is based on one of the questions I've had I have a sort of a small group of people who have chronic fatigue syndrome, and they have a few questions that they wanted to ask. And one of them was, how do you manage to deal with people who don't actually understand what chronic fatigue syndrome is during that time in your day-to-day life? You might have certain people who don't understand that there are certain things you can't make or can't do. Do you have to try and explain that to them? Do they always get it? Do they sometimes just think you're faking it? How is that?
Yeah, that's a big one. It's a big one. And I definitely have my own approach, and I'm not at all saying this should be everyone's approach. I don't know if it's right or the best way to go about it, but I imagine what it's like. You kind of just get on survival mode and you have to do what works for you. So I found that I have two approaches depending on who I'm dealing with. I've kind of grouped people into people who are close to me and I really care about what they think and I'd like them to understand a bit, and then the rest of the world. So for the people who are close to me, I found the best way to do it, because I can try explaining what I'm going through until I'm blue in the face, and it does not seem like it really sinks in.
Mm.
So I found the best approach is actually to find ways to get other people to explain it. So things like my parents or my partners or close friends, I'll find good documentaries or good podcasts, and then I'll just ask them to sit down and watch it or listen to it with me. And it seems to click more when they hear it coming from other people, or maybe it reinforces what you're going through because that other person is echoing what you've been saying. So it validates it a bit or paints a better picture of what the whole experience is like. So that's been my experience for people close to me. And fortunately, I've been lucky that the people close to me have been very good and very understanding, because I know that's not always the case with everybody. And then with the rest of the world, it kind of depends on how much I value what they think. And sometimes I lie. I just make up excuses. Yeah. It's interesting, but I just get exhausted of having to explain myself and my life over and over and over. So sometimes I'll meet a new friend that I don't know well. Let's call them an acquaintance, actually. They're like, hey, let's get together and go running. And I'll make jokes about myself being lazy, or that, like, I'm a sit-down kind of girl. Like, do you want to go for coffee? Other than explain to them my whole medical history.
It's difficult, isn't it? I'm in the exact same thing where there are a lot of people out there, and you want, in a sense, there's always a small part in the back of my head that wants everyone to know what this is so they can understand it, but that in reality, it's not going to work like that. And sometimes if you're trying to explain something, especially with something like chronic fatigue syndrome, to them, it might just sound a lot like, look, I'm really tired all the time. And I know you're really tired too, but I don't want to do it because I'm tired. And that's the concern. So I think sometimes I've done the same thing. I've kind of either made little jokes or kind of pulled away and said, look, actually I'm busy on that day, or I'm a little bit tired for that. I don't think I'll have the ability today to do that. And that kind of has been my way, at least. And it seems quite similar to your approach.
Yeah, I think we all have to have our boundaries. And it's, there's that part of me that wants to always be advocating and spreading awareness about this illness. And I shouldn't be covering it up. I shouldn't be lying. I should be upfront. That's exhausting. And you can't do that all the time. So, and I've also found too, if I choose the terminology, like I'll pick and choose, because I don't know what it's been like for you, but for me, chronic fatigue syndrome also includes an umbrella of other little diagnoses. So I was also diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, although I'm not sure I ever actually had it. But when I was dealing with people that I thought, because that one can have a bit more of awareness around it, people have heard of it, it might even sound more legit to some people. So when I was still trying to hold down a job, if I had to explain health issues, I wouldn't even say chronic fatigue syndrome. I would just say Lyme disease, because I felt like it was going to be completely understood.
It seems to have more credibility to the name, right?
Yeah, and they can size it up quickly. It's a bacterial infection. Okay, yes, I get that. I've heard of it. And again, not doing anything for moving forward the movement of understanding chronic fatigue syndrome, but sometimes you just, I don't know, I just look at my audience and I kind of pick the tools from my toolbox and what I think is going to be easiest and most effective for me.
Isn't it quite ironic then, therefore, that, if you have chronic fatigue syndrome, it can be quite exhausting to try and explain it to people? It's not the best mix, is it?
It's really not. I really want to tell you what I'm going through, but I am too tired.
Yeah, here's like, maybe give them a business card or something with the info on to read. So something else I was interested in knowing about you, and again, it was to do with the question that I got asked to ask you, but what did you personally find worse? Was it the physical effects or mental effects, or, is there difficult to separate them?
The physical effects were definitely worse for me. I had phases where the brain fog, and the way my mental clarity was affected was quite intense, but they were shorter in duration, and for the rest of my illness, those symptoms were more mild. So the physical symptoms were definitely the worst.
And what kind of physical symptoms? Is that just like the difficulty in moving physically?
The biggest one for me was a term I'm sure you know, I'm not sure if everyone else listening does, but the post-exertional malaise. So that extreme sickness and exhaustion that you get from exerting yourself and not recovering from rest. So just trying to do little things and then being laid out for hours or days or, weeks. It's really tough.
Yeah. How did you find the nutritional aspect? Because I'm trying to eat healthily currently, to varying degrees of success, I have to say, really. And I eat healthily, and then I sort of splurge a little bit on some chocolates and that kind of stuff. And it's difficult to find what's working and what's not. But how did you find the nutritional aspect?
Oh my goodness, it's been such a journey. Diet is such a crazy one. I think most of us would agree on this because there's so much conflicting information. And even if you're trying your hardest, it's really hard to know if you're on the right track. There's so many people that find one way that works really well, and then there's an equal but opposing group that says, no, another way is the way to go.
Oh yeah, I've got the best example of that. Sorry, the perfect thing I can think of there is the sort of a vegan versus carnivore diets. That's the biggest. That is the most conflicting piece of thing that I've noticed within the community. I'm so split between these two halves, really.
Oh, they're both so convincing. It's really tough. You can flip back and forth, and you're like, I am so on team carnivore. This makes so much sense. And then the more on the other side, you're like, oh my goodness, no.
It does feel like teams as well, doesn't it? It feels like sports teams.
And then plus, I think, at least this was my experience, is that in the beginning, I was battling a lot of food addictions when I first got sick. So it wasn't even just what I thought was best, but, I had this raging sugar addiction, that I had these horrible sugar cravings. So even if I just decided I didn't want to, it wasn't so simple for me as just flipping a switch. I would still break down and eat these things that I knew I wasn't supposed to be eating. And later on, years later, once I learned kind of how to be healthier and I healed my gut and did some different things, those cravings completely went away. So it's interesting that all those years I thought it was just weak willpower. I wasn't as strong as everybody else who was making good food choices. I actually just had a really messed up body that was making it difficult. So yeah, I tried a lot of different diets over the years. And for quite a while, I felt that something resembling kind of a keto diet was best. I was doing a really lean meat and vegetable kind of diet. And I was seeing some progress. And a lot of other people were seeing progress with this diet too. So I thought it was good. But my progress was still incredibly slow. And then I watched a documentary about the benefits of a vegan diet. It wasn't the first one I'd seen, but just at that time, I knew that my progress wasn't going as fast as I'd hoped it to be. And it was the Game Changers documentary, incidentally, and it was just really convincing. So my husband and I both actually decided to give it a go. We just went overnight, made the switch, and we committed to 3 months. We're like, let's do this. These people are just thriving on this diet, and let's give it a try. And for me, it was great. So I almost instantly knew, finally, after a lifetime of wondering, that this was the diet for me. And I still stick with it to this day. I'm about, I'd say, 95 to 98% whole food plant-based. And it just fits. Like, everything in my body works better. It's so obvious. I don't have to question it. I just know it's perfect for me. But I don't know that it's perfect for everybody else, because not everybody else has the same experience, which is maybe why it's so confusing.
Yeah, and I think it's important for everyone to obviously, you mentioned before it was a journey, and for everyone to go on their own journey themselves, take things out, put things in. I've certainly experimented. I've tried the keto diet for a month, and that didn't work for me. But I've done things like I've took out gluten from my diet. That's been, for me, I mean, I know a lot of people have also tried that, but that for me was massive, taking gluten out. And I also reduced things like lactose. So I think you definitely have to play around with a lot of different things to find out what it is that might be affecting you negatively. So what kind of advice would you give for people who are going through chronic fatigue syndrome at the moment? So, you've definitely had your fair share, you've been through the wars, and I know we've mentioned that no size fits all, but I definitely want to know if there's any approach which you might recommend to people who are listening.
There's a couple of different things that I think of when I think of this. I mean, one, I can, share some specific things that worked well for me, of course, which may or may not work for everybody else. But more importantly, I think it's more just the general approach and attitude that you have towards this, and being prepared that unfortunately it's probably going to be a bit of a marathon to get better. And for me, I really didn't value how much I needed to take care of my mental health, because those physical symptoms were so loud and they really seemed like my main problem. But I didn't get how difficult it was going to be to try and overcome something like this. So for me, when I started seeing a professional counselor, it actually helped me a lot, and just getting those supports in my place so I could go long term. Because I don't know how you found, but I've definitely found, and I hear this from a lot of people, that because it's so long and because this can strip away so much from your life and because it can be so difficult, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of anxiety. And when those things are taking over, your body can't heal. And when those things are taking over, you're not motivated to keep going and keep taking care of yourself. So that mental strength is your fuel for all of this. So I guess that would be the first thing I would say, be like, before you even start tackling all this physical stuff, like just make sure you've got the support, the mental health support to be strong enough to do this for the long term. And also, I would think, because I know for me in the beginning, I thought the answer was going to be like some medication or some supplement or, some one thing, like it's a thyroid problem, but in my experience, it wasn't any one thing. Not any one thing was going to fix me, quote unquote, and not any one thing was the problem. So just to be prepared to address a lot of things and to have to do a lot of work to get better, because this isn't one of those illnesses where you just sit back and take some medication or, do some simple therapy or get some surgery and then wait to heal and then it's gone. So yeah, just a very holistic approach to getting better. Those things, in my experience, deliver by far the best results. Like just finding the ways to naturally support your body's own ability to heal, and then just keep building that up, and then keep doing it every single day. For me, that's where I by far got the best results.
Yeah. And as someone who is myself, who's also trying to recover, I do think that's a bit of advice which I'm following now, and also recommend that too. I wanted to come on to sort of my last questions, and this is sort of an interesting one, really, because you're someone who's been through it, and it takes away a lot of years. We're not trying to play it down or anything like that. It can be an incredibly difficult process, and you have to manage to keep that motivation. Looking back now, is there anything which having chronic fatigue syndrome has taught you? Is there anything that you can gain positive from that experience?
Oh my goodness, we're gonna need a couple hours for this one.
Well, at least you can talk about it, I suppose.
There's so much. It's so incredible. And I hear this from so many other people as well. And I'd be interested to hear your experience also, that it's just chronic fatigue syndrome, or perhaps just these types of things in general, and they're like heavily disguised life coaches. I just find that every day you're paying attention, there's something to learn. And even though it's been horrifically difficult, and just I can't even put into words how tough some of my years have been. If I had the option to take it back, I don't think I could, because it's changed me so dramatically into someone completely different, and just sort of launched this life of mine, this dream life that I don't think I would have had I not had that catalyst, that awakening, this kind of boot camp of growth that I've been going through. So it's hard, I find, to sum it up into, these 3 specific things that I learned. Yeah. But it's just an overall mental toughness, physical toughness, focusing my priorities in life, what's important, how to take care of myself, feeling more in control. I no longer feel like this sort of helpless sitting duck that might just be struck down by illness at any time. I know it can happen, but I feel like I have a lot more control over that. I get now that there are things that we can do that can help us be healthier and live longer. And so it's just, overall, I've just learned how to better take care of myself, how I want to approach my life, what's important. And just giving me focus that I didn't have before. It changes you.
And it's the healthiest mindset to have too. I mean, I think it would be incredibly putting down on yourself if you manage to get through all that, because there's a lot of effort that goes into the place of the person going through it. They have to do a lot. And I think to then go through that and go, well, that was, I think you're kind of doing yourself down a little bit. You got to give yourself the credit that you've done that. You've probably grown a lot through that process.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, that is all the questions I have for you, Raelan. I want to thank you very much for being on the podcast. It's been amazing to have you on, really.
Thank you again for having me. I really am grateful for the opportunity. I just, like I was saying before, love getting more information about this illness out, and love connecting with other people. And this is my first time ever on a podcast. So.
Hey, brilliant. And also, as you mentioned before, I'm sure this will be used by other people to explain their own symptoms to their friends and family too.
Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely be forwarding this on to people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Raelan.
All right. Thank you.